Hello and welcome to Kloeker's Education Foundation, providing quality content for amazing teachers and students. If you're joining us from a previous video or previous lesson, welcome back. And if this is your first time, we're glad you're here. This is our World History series, and this lesson is on the Middle Ages. Now, before we begin, don't forget to check out the link in the description below for a set of free guided notes to go along with this lesson. And while you're there, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't have to do it at the end. Thank you. Now let's dive in. If you're watching this in class, let's pause the video for a moment and have a discussion. If our government were to disappear today, how would our lives change tomorrow? How would they be different in a month? What would have changed in the course of a year? When your teacher is ready, you may unpause the video and resume. Thank you. I hope there was some great discussion. We have one major essential question for this lesson, and it is what caused Europe to change from a large, unified, and powerful Roman Empire into a chaotic era that we now know as the Middle Ages. And so our lesson will be broken down into three parts. What is the Middle Ages? What are the causes of the Middle Ages? And what changes occurred during the Middle Ages? The Middle Ages is the age after the beginning and before the end. I'm just kidding. The Middle Ages is the period between the Roman era and the time known as the Renaissance. It's about 1,000 years. It is sometimes referred to as the Dark Ages or the medieval period, and some historians will even go so far as to break that 1,000-year period up into different sets, ages, or periods, depending on what events they're talking about. Generally, this is seen as a very bleak and dangerous time for most people, especially in Europe. All of this chaos began because of the fall of Rome and the Roman Empire. Now, this is a very famous painting known as the Fall of Rome, and you can see the absolute chaos, people being stabbed, falling off bridges, the war, the carnage, the ship's decay, the destruction of the city. If you missed that lesson, you have a link for it right here. You can go ahead and click, but if you're ready to continue, we'll move on. The Middle Ages were caused because the collapse of the Roman Empire. Now, that was because of the different Germanic tribes that were invading. Now, not all of the tribes that invaded the Romans were known as the Germanic tribes, but since many of them are coming from Germania, they generally get clumped together as the Germanic tribes. Germanic tribes invaded the English Isles, they invaded through Francia or Gaul into Iberia, across North Africa into Italy, crossing the Alps. They were generally destroying everything within Europe. These invasions are going to disrupt trade, they're going to disrupt merchants' lives, they're going to disrupt the food sources and food supply into major cities, they're going to destroy the economic centers, money is going to become scarce. In many cases, it's safe to not have any money because if you have no money, then the villagers and raiders can't come by and take your things because there's nothing to take. We saw people were leaving the cities because they were being sources of urban decay. They were the source and the target for all of the invasions that were happening. And so cities will be generally abandoned during this era and people will begin moving to the countryside. With the rural boom, Roman cities are decaying. The people who are staying in the cities are not being able to lead the spread out population anymore. We see a decline of learning because the German invaders do not know how to read and write. They don't learn Latin, which is the common language, at least of the Roman Empire. And with everyone moving out to the countryside, education became less important because your sole survival depended on being able to grow your crops, keep the animals alive, and don't die because the warring tribe came to town. education was not that important when you put those as your top three priorities. We see a loss of the common language, right? Latin is going to change. The Germanic people are mixing with the Roman population. This, of course, leads to a very diverse set of languages, such as the Romance languages, where the Germans are changing the language by marrying into the culture. We see the loss of the established government because the Germans don't have written laws. There's not really an orderly government because they're relying on family ties as opposed to someone is appointed into a position. It's not a great time. We'll begin to see the rise of the feudal system where there's a Germanic king at the top of the pyramid. He has, of course, his family, lords and ladies. They're going to have land, they're going to have property, they're going to supply troops to the war efforts. You have the knights and the warriors, and then below them you have the peasants, the serfs, and the merchants. We'll break the feudal system down in our medieval Europe lesson. Now, the effects of the Middle Ages. We talked about what caused it. We're going to see the rise of the Frankish kingdom. Now, we had a little foreshadowing of this in the Charlemagne and Byzantine, right after the fall of Rome. We talked about the rise of Islam because these two things are happening at the same time. And so now we're coming back into Europe as we get into our medieval Europe unit. Now, with these new Germanic kingdoms emerging, we have, of course, the fight for power. We see the rise of the Frankish kingdom and the feudal system trying to protect the peasants by supplying taxes and soldiers to the top of the pyramid. We will see that the power of the Catholic Church is going to grow as it is the predominant and only church in the world at this time as far as Christianity is concerned. We see the steps that the Pope is going to take. We'll break some of these down and talk about them in each lesson. We'll have a whole video on the power and rise of the church within Europe within this unit. Generally, as people are moving out of the cities, despite the fact that it is a dangerous time, Europe will be generally safer for living out in the countryside. People don't want to go and pillage the countryside. They want to go to the cities. We'll see a decline in learning, especially those outside of the church. And we'll see that new languages are replacing Latin as a mix with the Germanic tribes and other local cultures, such as the Spanish. We'll see the rise of the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French. Italian is going to develop, the Romanian language, and of course, this is all going to influence Europe down the road. We'll see early European countries starting to form an identity, such as the Franks, which will eventually become the modern nation of France. We'll talk about that in our Germanic kingdoms video because, yes, the Franks were considered Germans at one point in time. And we'll also talk about how each European nation is going to begin developing within medieval kingdoms. So this is a great precursor and intro into our unit. So take a few moments and just kind of reflect on this video and previous lessons. What caused Europe to change from a large, unified, powerful Roman Empire into this chaotic era that we know as the Middle Ages? That wraps up our lesson. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this intro into the Middle Ages. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the video if you haven't already. Check us out on Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, Rumble, and the Kloeker Education Foundation website. Again, we have a ton of resources and lessons there that you might like. If you want to see what's new and what's next in the series as we break down the Germanic kingdoms, medieval Europe, the power and rise of the church, and even the Crusades, click here. For something you might like, click down below. And to subscribe to our channel, click here on the right. All of this and more is just a click away. I'll see you there.